And that happens in the OTC aisle too with medications. And a lot of medications were changed. The labeling was changed because people were accidentally giving their kids too much and bad things were happening.
The OTC is really a good example there because you have acetaminophen, Tylenol. And you have twice as many ER visits from Tylenol, acetaminophen, as you do the whole supplement industry.
And there's no cry to make Tylenol prescription.
Right.
Because that would be very bad for the people that make acetaminophen.
The statistics, almost exactly twice as many. There are 56,000 ER visits per year from acetaminophen versus 23,000 from the whole supplement industry.
So would that data be skewed by how many people take Tylenol versus how many people take supplements?
Yeah, I mean...
A little bit, but that still is that's a bigger number than I thought it would be.
I would say that with how many people take supplements, there's probably a lot more people taking supplements than take...
It's just Tylenol's in everything.
It is.
Like you think you're getting something for a cough, it has Tylenol. Or a runny nose, it has Tylenol.
Right.
Like I feel like that needs to be looked at before anything else. Are we properly labeling these things?
But that's the point. That's the point, is that they want to go after the supplement industry for that it's
being unsafe.
Being unsafe. But yet we have an over-the-counter that's thought of as being fairly safe by the FDA, people are allowed to take it on their own without a doctor's prescription or anything. Yet it's having a lot more detrimental effects. I mean, including there's 500 deaths a year from acetaminophen. Now, about half of those are purposeful deaths.
Like suicides.
Suicides and things. But the other half are people that are just getting too much and don't realize it.
Because it's in a lot of things.
Right.
And I think I heard, too, that if aspirin were to file with the FDA today, they may not put it over the counter due to the safety profile.
Yeah.
And people take an 81 milligram aspirin because it's good for my heart.
Right.
Because the front of the box has a heart on it.
Right.
You're listening to Take on Healthcare with Ted Suzelis and Mary Sheehan. Ted is a naturopathic doctor who has been helping people in Northeast Ohio for over 20 years to live a happier and healthier life through natural healthcare, including dietary advice, vitamins, herbs, and other natural substances. Mary is a full-time pharmacist who also helps leaders in healthcare suffering with anxiety and depression integrate the best parts of traditional and alternative medicine. Are you someone who regularly takes herbs, vitamins, and minerals? What is influencing your purchasing decisions? Should you be skeptical of the supplement industry? Today's podcast will help you understand how the supplement industry works, how to know if you really need those supplements you purchased, and how to make sure the supplements you take are safe.
Ted, when I think of like the supplement industry going wrong, I have this one image, which is a little bit dated, but it's this image of the top of my refrigerator filled with a bunch of supplements that I don't remember to take or I don't know what they're for. But I think today the image is more like people go on the Instagram or the TikTok and they see somebody touting something, an influencer, and then there's all these boxes of supplements that are being dropped off.
Right.
And they don't know what they're for, what they should take. And so I think supplements I take them. I think they're really important, but I see why there is a lot of confusion and maybe some criticism. So this podcast, we decided to address a video called "The Supplement Industry is Full of BS" by Johnnyharris on YouTube. And it does provide an interesting look at the supplement industry through his perspective. Focuses on the lack of regulation, potential health risks, and the industry's marketing tactics. So you were familiar with him before. This was the first I'd seen it, and we both watched this video, and this is kind of our response. And supplements are definitely in your wheelhouse.
Right,
so
right.
I like the topic. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you said, I've watched Johnnyharris's videos for quite a while. Probably since early on in the pandemic, I happened to start going on YouTube looking for something new to watch, and and found one of his videos and realized that it was a high production value video, like a TV episode. And I only thought of YouTube as just kids putting their little clips of
Yeah.
their video games or
cats.
skateboarding
Yeah.
or whatever, and really didn't know that there was this highly produced videos at that time.
And he must have had some credentials. You wouldn't be interested either. What is his background or credentials?
He's a journalist.
Oh, he's a journalist.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
he's over the years he was working for Vox for a while to do a lot of their videos and things. So he's got a lot of production there and does a lot of good job of a lot of videos. But this one in particular sort of rubbed me the wrong way because there were a lot of things that he said that are definitely accurate and good, but some extreme views that he pulled in also. Partially, he framed it in this way because obviously he was looking to portray it that way.
Yeah.
His only experts that he talked about and actually had on there were from the FDA or, Ivy League pharmacists or things like that were giving a very much FDA conventional medicine viewpoint.
Right. And I thought to myself, I kind of laughed being a pharmacist that they interviewed a pharmacist. I'm like, my colleagues don't know the first thing about supplements. Some do, but they've educated themselves.
Right.
And they didn't learn it in school, whereas naturopaths learned it in school. That would have been the person to have on.
Right.
So right away I was like, I just lost some credibility for me because he didn't interview the people that know the industry.
Exactly.
That was a problem for me. But I think we should, first of all, define the word supplement because people use it to mean all kinds of things. Right.
Right. Yeah. So really, what I would say the best way to define supplements and dietary supplements, obviously, because that's what we're talking about, dietary supplements.
Yes.
Is there's two different categories.
Okay.
The first category would be herbs, and they work in a lot of ways work a lot like drugs. And they have a form of action that a lot of times drugs are actually manufactured trying to mimic a function that an herb does.
So true.
We'll talk about that. But I would say the bigger and more appropriate category, with dietary supplements has to do with different nutrients that are already in the body, and we're giving the body these nutrients to help it to heal.
Yes, I think that's I wish there was another word because I do see such a clear difference between giving the body something that it needs and an herb that has an action upon the body, right?
Right.
And that's why I would tell people too that we're on a thyroid medication. I'm like, you kind of have to look at it like a supplement. Your body's not making it, so we're going to supplement this.
Right.
The same with a type 1 diabetic. The insulin is technically a drug, but it really is also a supplement. So it just gets a little bit tricky. So I like your definition.
Yeah, and I guess the third category, which isn't really, it gets lumped in, but it's not truly a dietary supplement by the law, is homeopathic remedies.
Oh, right.
Because
That's a whole
they're
different
regulated by the government in a separate way.
Yes, category. And that's a whole different thing.
Right.
All right.
We don't need to go over that.
We really don't know.
So, when we talk about nutrients that are already in the body, so we're talking about things like vitamins are really easy to understand.
Yes,
and
they're in our food and everybody knows that.
And we know that these are essential nutrients that our body needs.
For all the many miraculous mechanisms.
Right. A lot of people understand the omega-3, 6, 9 fatty acids. These are essential fats that we need in our body to function properly.
Correct.
And amino acids. So, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins.
Right.
So we eat proteins to be able to break those proteins down to have these amino acid building blocks to help our body to heal. Enzymes, pancreatic enzymes.
Oh, that's a good one. Or digestive enzymes.
Right. Yeah, and then certain hormones are considered supplements too.
Like melatonin. Is a hormone.
Yes.
But it's considered a supplement.
Right.
How about things like the acidophilus and those kinds of things that we take to replenish our gut flora?
Right.
Those are supplements.
Yes.
Because we need those, but it's a whole different. It's a little bit
they're
of
bacteria that are still already in our gut, or
that's true.
We're supplementing strains that should be in there to have a certain function.
Great. Great.
So I think that that's real. You don't really see that as far as a definition anywhere, but I think that that's the most succinct, best way to understand dietary supplements.
I agree. That's a really good way to understand it.
And so to sort of take that one step further, to give you an example, so when we're talking about amino acids, so you have a couple of amino acids, L-tryptophan and 5-HTP or 5-hydroxytryptophan, which are precursors to the brain chemical serotonin.
Yes.
So when we give one of these amino acids, it's giving the body its building blocks so that the body can make serotonin on its own.
Right. And serotonin is kind of like a feel-good neurotransmitter, meaning something that works in the brain to keep the mood. That's the most popular way. And a medication then used to increase serotonin would be considered a drug would do that, but not by providing the body the building blocks to make its own serotonin, but by doing something in the brain that somehow manipulates the brain's either a breaking down capacity or enhances a receptor mechanism or something like that. Very different. And that is, I think, a really easy way for people to understand like the difference.
Yeah. And to simplify that even more, I tell my patients mostly that, we're giving the supplements to help the body to make more. And most of our popular antidepressants that are helping with serotonin, the SSRIs, are slowing the breakdown of serotonin to try to hold more serotonin in the nerves.
In the nerves, But slowing down the breakdown, the elimination in the brain.
Yeah. And so they work in totally different manners, which also means that we have to be careful. We can't add both together. Because if you give building blocks so your body can make more serotonin
and then prevent its
breakdown, then you can get serotonin syndrome and potentially die.
Yes, that is a really good point. And where I was going with it is that doesn't mean that if you have, which is, I guess, the same place you were going, a diagnosis of depression, that you can then stop your medication and just give yourself the building blocks. Because it doesn't act the same in every single person. Just because you supplement with 5-HTP or L-tryptophan, which you can get over the counter, doesn't mean your body or my body will do with it what we'd like. Which is because it's complicated. There's more things. And I think we just need to make that point. Neither one of us are proposing anybody do anything like that.
And
we're just trying to make a point.
We're trying to help people understand and define these.
Exactly. That's it.
And even if you are going to take these supplements, you really should be doing it under the care of a professional.
Yes, absolutely. We both agree on that as well. Even though you are free to go ahead and buy them, and that's why people end up with just a lot of things they aren't working, or they say they're not working, or they don't know, or are they needed. But we're going to break down all of that.
Yeah, and a couple of other good examples I think of supplements for people, would be we did touch on the digestive enzymes, and most people probably don't know what that is, but people talk about enzymes a lot.
Yes.
And so digestive enzymes are produced by the pancreas to help us to break down our foods, different types of, enzymes. And so we do have dietary supplements, whether they're plant-based or animal-based, but still the same thing, trying to give more of those enzymes to digest our foods.
And there's a drug for that too.
Correct.
That can be prescribed to do that exact same thing. Yes.
Yeah, and that's where, that's the big buzzword, the EPI, exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, because now they have a drug for it, so they develop a diagnosis, so then they can prescribe the drug.
And it's expensive.
Is it?
Yeah, very expensive. And then you had, let's give some more examples of hormones. Melatonin and vitamin D.
Yeah.
Technically a hormone.
Right, it's a vitamin and a hormone, but yes, it has both effects.
Okay, explain that. I didn't realize. I always think of it like as a little thing that was misnamed a long time ago.
Right. Well, it has antioxidant effects, but it just does so many different things that it is technically a vitamin too, but it's a hormone.
And how are we defining hormone? Because I bet people don't know what a hormone is.
So
I think of it as a chemical messenger.
Definitely. Hormones, that's the best way to define hormones. They're chemical messengers in the body. And so they're relaying a signal. And so one of my favorite examples of this is talking about insulin resistance, which we've talked about weight and things in some of our previous podcasts. But insulin resistance is really hard for the general public to understand.
Agreed. Yes.
And so I think this is a good place to sort of help people understand what a hormone is by also talking about that. And so my example that I give to patients is that a hormone, is a messenger. So it's just like your Amazon delivery driver bringing a package to your house.
That has supplements in it.
Exactly. And so when we're talking about insulin resistance, so the Amazon driver is bringing insulin to, bringing insulin and to your body. Yeah. And insulin, what it does is it triggers your body to accept sugar.
Right. We don't want the sugar hanging out in the blood.
Right.
It does bad things in there. We want it in the cells so it can do the energy thing.
Yeah. And so insulin resistance is you're sitting on your couch watching TV and the Amazon delivery driver, well, maybe it's better that it's, Grubhub or somebody.
Okay.
Yeah, because Amazon's just going to drop it on your porch.
Okay, that's true. We're switching the metaphor, folks, but it's not that big of a leap. Join us.
No.
Yeah.
So, Grubhub, they come, ring your doorbell. You get up off the couch, go to the door, get your food, and go back and sit down and eat or whatever. But insulin resistance is more like you have some kids down the street that are doing ding and ditch. Remember that as a kid where people run up and ring the doorbell and then run away and hide. And you open the door and there's nobody there. Well, say you have some really, mischievous kids that keep ringing your doorbell. Well, eventually you're not going to get up and answer the door every single time.
So the signal kind of loses its efficiency.
Right, because
that's insulin
you're being
resistance.
bombarded with too much of a signal, so you don't do it as often. So maybe every 3 or 4 times you get up to go to the door and make sure that your food hasn't gotten there.
Right.
And so that's insulin resistance, where our sugar levels are so high that we produce more insulin to try to regulate it, but the cells stop reacting as quickly.
Yes, I love that because people forget about the cells.
Right.
Like just because there's something there doesn't mean it's going to get to do the thing it's supposed to do.
Correct.
There's other things happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a great example.
Yeah. And so that's one example, so like thyroid hormone, a lot of thyroid hormone works on your metabolism and helping your cells to be, revved up or
efficient.
increase your temperature, all kinds of different things to stimulate your body. So I think that's a pretty good.
Yeah, no, that was really good. And back to just to rewind a little bit, the difference between an herb and a vitamin, both classified by we're talking about government classifications as supplements, meaning they can be sold over the counter. Anyone can go in and purchase them. And I guess it's kind of like, a prescription medication being used to modify a process like we talked about. Like say atorvastatin is going to go in and modify how your body metabolizes cholesterol versus an insulin, which would be kind of like a supplement if you have type 1 diabetes. So it's a little bit like that. So I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about like herbs as part of the supplement industry, because some of them really are quite potent medicines.
Right. And so a good example of herbs is, and how, like we talked about earlier, how a lot of drugs are created to mimic herbal functions.
Yes.
So an old herb called Rauwolfia.
And now I'm remembering that from my early pharmacology days.
Yeah.
Like when I was looking at these slides, I'm like, that sounds familiar. I had to go back 35 years to remember. Yes.
Right. And so before we had prescription blood pressure medications, Rauwolfia was an herb that was prescribed a lot because it worked really well at lowering blood pressure.
Do we know the mechanism? I'm just curious.
I don't know the exact mechanism.
A sidebar.
Right.
I think it was not like our drugs receptors on the, something on a receptor doing something to the blood vessels. I think it was more like, I think it was like the ashwagandha for blood pressure, right? Like it did a lot of things in our circulatory system.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway.
And so the big problem with Rauwolfia is it had a nasty side effect of causing severe depression in some people.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And I think that was, when we're in the early drug industry, that was a motivation to produce medications to lower blood pressure that didn't have such a nasty side effect.
Right. So to take a piece of it, but to discard the part of it that did this other thing.
Right.
So interesting.
Yeah. Sort of turned around now where we're taking the herbs so that we can have less side effects and have similar functions.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. But now, Wolfia, there's companies like Ayush Herbals, an Ayurvedic Indian herbal company of some really good naturopathic doctors that have developed extracts that don't have any of the side effects.
So they did it. They did what the drug companies wanted to do at that time. Just they found the pieces of it, the chemicals in it.
The proper way to extract the active components to lower blood pressure without having the side effects.
That's great. That's what we all want, right?
Right.
We want the benefits without the risks, as much as we can have that, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then also, you were talking about
ashwagandha is like my favorite.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite too.
Yeah.
And ashwagandha, where Rauwolfia is mostly a very specific, function. I mean, we don't use Rauwolfia for anything but blood pressure.
Okay.
Where ashwagandha has so many different effects in the body. And so it's one of those herbs that we call an adaptogenic herb.
Which means, restores homeostasis.
Right,
and
it balances out the system.
Yes, and no drug can really do that.
No.
Because, first of all, ashwagandha, that it recognizes, to personify it, that there is a system.
Right.
Whereas the drugs, just one thing. Exactly. And tend to think, well, the circulatory system doesn't talk to the nervous system, doesn't talk to the hormonal system. And ashwagandha knows we're all talking all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I do have to, when I recommend ashwagandha to some of my patients, I do have to walk them through this a little because say we're recommending it to calm down anxiety and stress, but they don't want to be too tired, but they don't understand ashwagandha also can boost energy and physical endurance. In fact, there was an interesting mouse study for endurance with ashwagandha, and it was mice in water. And one group had been doing the ashwagandha. Mm-hmm. The other group was a control group that wasn't getting the ashwagandha, and the group that had the ashwagandha could paddle a lot longer without drowning.
That's amazing. And who wouldn't want that?
Right.
So that's where I have to caution. So who wouldn't want reduced stress and still feel energized?
Right.
That being said, we are not suggesting people run out,
of course,
and purchase ashwagandha. You say, of course, and I say, I really think people need reminded.
Right.
Because we live in a society that is so impacted by what they hear in the media, and we're trying to do media,
right?
And so we always say that you should purchase with caution and under the supervision of a healthcare practitioner. Right. We're just trying to explain again what it is and the difference. But by no means should anybody, because of various reasons, it might not be best for your body. There may be purity concerns. There may be potency concerns, which we'll get into.
Right. Yeah,
so don't do that.
But so there's so many just other interesting functions of ashwagandha.
Yeah, we love it.
Because, it does help with sleep. Mm-hmm. And a little interesting one that I've used with a lot of my patients that are going through cancer radiation therapy, ashwagandha actually has a lot of research behind it. When people are going through radiation therapy, it can help keep the healthy cells healthier and more vibrant, but still allowing the cancer cells to get killed.
See, to me, that is the perfect thing that needs to be then studied.
Right.
Because that would be such a helpful thing.
Yeah.
But in my personal opinion, not anybody, but people who are going through something like chemotherapy should have a naturopath to consult with. This is a really good example. Yeah. And there is so much. Right. There's some data behind it, and it would be great if there could be more.
But I've had several patients who have been getting getting the radiation therapy, and their oncologist is just floored how well they breeze through their radiation therapy because we're giving them ashwagandha and some other nutrients that tend to work and help with that too.
Yeah, that's amazing. People should know this. All right. So what else did we want to say? about that.
Oh, I think another piece of it is that things like ashwagandha, herbs aren't just analogous to drugs necessarily.
Right.
They don't just have, an active mechanism of how it works. And we're talking about ashwagandha being a lot more broad.
Yes.
But also these herbs have nutrient qualities too, antioxidant qualities or other nutrients that maybe we haven't even labeled. And if you just give an active component for that herb, you don't get anywhere near the efficacy as giving the whole herb.
Yes. It's like back in the day, I think it was Deepak Chopra said, taking the vitamin C out of the orange is like taking the knowledge but throwing away the wisdom. Like we don't know what else, what other chemicals are in there that enhance. And in this case, act in a different way.
Right. And my last point on the herbs is that unlike drugs, which, the first drugs were released in the 1940s?
It was aspirin was the first, wasn't it?
Well, aspirin's a little bit different, but
that's true because it comes from a plant initially.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we're talking about a very short, 80 years or so of releasing drugs, and a lot of the drugs we use now have been released within the last 20 or 30 years.
Yes, it was a good 10 years for drugs, good 30 years for drugs.
Where herbs, all of the herbs that we use today have been used for centuries.
Yeah.
And for several centuries have been meticulously documented by herbalists as to their functions and side effects. So when we talk about risks, there's a lot more information about the risks of herbs and the possible dangers than with drugs, where how often do we see a drug that gets released onto the market and then gets pulled back off or gets a big black box warning because there's some side effects that they didn't expect to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a different way of gathering data, or maybe I even want to use the word wisdom. Like herbs come with centuries of wisdom and a way to relay that information through people that knew about it to the next generation.
Right.
Whereas drugs can be released, have a certain safety profile validated by the government, but then still they get released and then taken off because something happens with the general public that they didn't see in the studies.
Right.
Yeah, that does happen.
It just comes down to...
It's a different system.
Right. But it's just, we've had a long time to look at these different herbs and pick the ones that are the most safe. Those are the ones that tend to get used very often. Even today.
What do you think of this notion? I've heard people say this, that on Earth, on this amazing, miraculous earth and all of the things that grow, that there's a solution for every ailment that's growing on earth? Or is that too woo-woo for you? Is that only something that people like me think is true?
Well, I think
it's an interesting concept.
It is. And it's one of those that, there are so many different plants that we haven't documented that we
could
really
be doing some great stuff for us.
Right. We just don't know. And that's the thing is that's something that's very plausible and feasible.
We just don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll put it in that category.
Right.
We just don't know. That's a nice thinking, but we don't know. All right, so that was that. Okay. Back to the video and the risks that you just alluded to. The danger of supplements, some things that have happened that got a lot of media attention that gave supplements. They made people panic, even to the point we should remove them all from the market for our own safety.
Yeah.
So
number one in that video, he highlights a statistic that there are about 23,000 ER visits from supplement ingestion.
Yes, I saw that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What he doesn't bother to say is there's also around 700,000 ER visits from drug reactions.
Yep.
And if you look at, they don't really, it's hard to, look at documenting how that happens and why people are going to the ER and ages and stuff. But I found some other studies from U.S. poison control, people calling poison control, because they think that there has been an ingestion that might be harmful.
Okay.
And around 70% of their calls for dietary supplements are for patients under the age of 6.
Meaning the kids grab something they shouldn't have.
Right. Well,
okay.
Either A, the kids grabbed something they shouldn't have, or B, the parents were giving them dosages inappropriately because they didn't know how to dose it because they're not doing it with a professional.
And that happens in the OTC aisle too with medications. Right. And a lot of medications were changed. The labeling was changed because people were accidentally giving their kids too much and bad things were happening.
Right. Well, and that's a the OTC is really a good example there because you have acetaminophen, Tylenol. Yeah. And you have twice as many ER visits from Tylenol than acetaminophen as you do the whole supplement industry.
And there's no cry to make Tylenol prescription.
Right.
Because that would be very bad for the people that make acetaminophen.
Yeah. So looking at the statistics, almost exactly twice as many. There are 56,000 ER visits per year from acetaminophen versus 23,000 from the whole supplement industry.
So would that data be skewed by how many people take Tylenol versus how many people take supplements?
Yeah, I mean
a little bit, but that still is that's a bigger number than I thought it would be.
I would say that with how many people take supplements, there's probably a lot more people taking supplements than take...
It's just Tylenol's in everything.
It is.
Like you think you're getting something for a cough, it has Tylenol. Or a runny nose, it has Tylenol.
Right.
Like I feel like that needs to be looked at before anything else. Are we properly labeling these things?
But that's the point. That's the point is that they want to go after the supplement industry for, that it's
being
not
unsafe.
Being unsafe. But yet... we have an over-the-counter that's thought of as being fairly safe by the FDA. People are allowed to take it on their own without a doctor's prescription or anything. Yet it's having a lot more detrimental effects. I mean, including there's 500 deaths a year from acetaminophen. Now, about half of those are purposeful deaths,
like suicides
and things, but the other half are people that are just getting too much and don't realize it
because it's in a lot of things.
Right.
And I think I heard too that if aspirin were to file with the FDA today, they may not put it over the counter due to the safety profile. Yeah. And people take an 81 milligram aspirin because it's good for my heart.
Right.
Because the front of the box has a heart on it.
Right. And
your doctor should know you're doing that.
One little side note is that acetaminophen, if you go to the ER because you have acetaminophen poisoning, they're going to give a drug, that is actually N-acetylcysteine.
I remember that from back in the day. There were so many when I was a little baby pharmacist. And it stinks to high heaven. And you put it in, you open up the liquid and you put it in the soda thing and put the straw in it so people will take it. Yeah. Yes, and N-acetylcysteine now
is a great supplement that has a lot of detox properties, good for the lungs, lots of different things.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you can buy that over the counter?
Yes.
N-acetylcysteine. But again, shouldn't be just buying it. But it is amazing.
And recently, within the last couple of years, there was a push by the FDA to pull NAC off of the...
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, and it was because, well, for one, they don't like to have supplements that are very similar to a drug.
Yeah, so, that makes sense. Right, okay.
Which the supplement had been on the shelf before the drug and used. But... they were going after NAC because a lot of hangover cure supplements, had NAC in them, and they were claiming that this was going to cure your hangover.
Oh boy!
So it was companies that were not being proper about documenting what they're using it improperly. And now NAC, if you take it before with alcohol. If you take it prophylactically, it can help the liver, with alcohol toxicity.
Oh.
Interestingly enough, if you take it right with alcohol, it can actually do more damage to the liver for some reason.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
See,
it's crazy.
that's again why people really need to know what they're doing and consult a naturopathic doctor for things like this.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more later about the the claims that can be made about supplements.
Yes, we will get into that because that's where people that make supplements say things they're not legally allowed to say that are untrue.
Yeah. But I wanted to get back to a couple of other interesting things, like with the ER visits.
Okay.
And just because somebody is taking a supplement and they get scared and they go to the ER doesn't necessarily mean that it's causing harm.
Oh, but it's tracked as a visit that involved a supplement.
Right.
So that goes into the data.
Like, for instance, I've had 2 patients that I can think of that I recommended a B-complex supplement that had the flush form of niacin in it. That it was a small dosage that most people shouldn't have a reaction to, but they just happen to be overly sensitive to a niacin flush. And so
they got scared.
Yeah. So one of the patients called our office in panic because they thought they were having an allergic reaction to it because of that flushing.
Yes.
And so they called us right before they were getting ready to head out to the ER. And the other one was calling us actually on the way to the ER and had to let them know, that's a niacin flush. It'll go away within the next 20 minutes and you're going to be 100% fine.
Yeah.
It's not harmful, but it feels bad.
Yes. And I think there was a time when I was dispensing a lot of non-flush niacin, but then it wasn't really doing what the cardiologist wanted it to do.
Right. The non-flush niacin doesn't really help so much with cholesterol like the flush form.
Right. And then we went back to the flush form
right.
niacin. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I could see how that could make people nervous. So this is like 2 of your patients. And so like kind of extrapolate that, how many people take niacin and would get scared if that happened and
didn't have the doctor to call before they go to the ER.
Right. Put their mind at ease and realize it's nothing it's not an allergic reaction.
Right. And so I guess that's along with that, there are very few cases of supplements that are really implicated in long-term injury or death just from the herb
itself
or supplement itself. Where the pharmaceutical industry would like you to believe that, they're just not tracked well enough. And there's a lot more deaths happening that we just don't know about because they're not regulated well enough.
That's what we were told. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm all for having some regulation. My fear, though, is just like anything when politics get involved and we start to regulate something more, is it's a slippery slope.
Agreed.
Where, okay, we can do this, and so we want to keep on that same path where you get to countries like Germany where in order to take vitamin C, you have to get a prescription from a doctor.
Yeah. We don't want that.
No. We want better regulation for the industry, and we'll talk about how that looks.
Yes.
But we want to make sure that it's done in a way that doesn't just lead us down that same pathway.
That doesn't infringe on our freedom.
Right.
To take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I guess I look at it as sort of a lose-lose, argument here where the medical industry doesn't train their doctors to actually understand supplements or know how they work or their side effects or anything. And they won't legitimize naturopathic doctors who do have the training for how all these supplements work. Yet if they do this regulation and get it to where all supplements are prescription only, no supplements will be sold because there's very few doctors that can prescribe them.
Yeah. That's well said. Okay, so where does that... contamination.
Yeah.
That's a good little segue from safety.
Right.
So supplements have been contaminated.
Yeah.
Tylenol has been contaminated, which was handled, but that it does happen. Yes, it has happened. And I remember because I was around, the L-tryptophan situation.
Right. Which actually, if you watch
Turned
that,
out to be not.
well, you watched the Johnny Harris video, and I didn't really, because this was early mid 90s. I wasn't really following the industry so much at that point in time.
Okay.
But evidently the there was a problem with contamination of L-tryptophan that was causing some deaths and other issues, and that was part of the reason for them wanting to regulate the supplement industry.
Right. And then there was like a few batches, I believe, that were contaminated that came from a certain country. I don't even think this batch was made in America.
Well, it was at the time, the supplement industry was very much smaller, so that was probably the only supplier.
They could that
was actually extracting the L-tryptophan from the herb.
And what was it contaminated with? I don't remember what they uncovered. Know. Yeah,
but we found out
terrible.
that it was a contamination, which can happen.
Not that L-tryptophan. It wasn't an overdose of L-tryptophan.
Right.
It was a contamination in the products.
Right. And I can't remember. I think there was something like 50 or 60 deaths from it and other long-term injuries, which that's a shame. But it was a contaminant. And this can happen for salmonella contaminated lettuce or things too.
True.
That even though anything that's regulated, you can always miss something.
Yes, it's a risk for sure. And they've since fixed that, and you can buy pretty clean. I mean, there hasn't been any issues since that one.
Correct.
That was fixed.
Yeah, it was off the market from the mid 90s to the mid 2000s. For probably at least 10 or 12 years.
That's a lot longer than I remember. Yeah.
Right. Because I remember one of my professors in medical school who was a big proponent of tryptophan, and it was taken off the market. And so for some of his patients to help them to sleep or some of the other benefits, he was actually having them get a veterinary form.
Oh, wow.
So that they could actually get that supplement to actually help themselves.
Oh, my goodness.
But of course, this was after they figured out about the contamination.
Yeah.
But before
they got it back on the market.
Allowed to be
they
back
went
on the
through
market.
the steps to get it back on the market. How about supplements being spiked with illegal drugs? That's a more recent issue.
Yeah. And when we talk about this too, it's really something that for most people it's not an issue. And especially when you look at good large supplement companies, these are small backroom supplement companies that are doing things illegally.
Right. But in a free market, they're allowed to be there.
Right. Yeah. So for instance, last summer, I had a patient come to me and talk about this, I think it was from Taiwan. It was all in some kind of Asian writing, called tappy tea or tapy tea, I think it was, pronounced. And it was a tea that, people were taking, and it was really helping with pain. And they loved it. And I had several Amish patients that were on it, and other, patients. And so when I first heard about this, and this patient raving about it, that her husband was getting so much relief from his pain, the first thing I do is go online because I've never heard of this.
Yeah. And
the first page on Google was a warning from the FDA, because they found that tea contained the steroid dexamethasone and the anti-inflammatory piroxicam.
No wonder they felt so good.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness! And those are piroxicam and dexamethasone are not allowed to be sold in this country without a prescription.
Right. Yeah, and I would say that most of the time where we see this happening, the biggest thing is sexual enhancement supplements.
Okay.
That you can see, fairly periodically, if you follow the FDA, that they find a company that is sneaking Cialis or things,
prescription medications into herbs,
into the sexual enhancement supplements.
Wow.
But also a lot of weight loss and athletic performance
have like
supplements,
ephedrine in it.
different things. Yeah.
Well, ephedrine used to be over the counter, but
Yeah.
in a spray form for asthma.
So ephedra is an interesting herb when we talk about the supplement industry, and it's actually a good way to look at things that have been pulled off the market, because this is an herb that's been used in Chinese medicine for years and years, that was very good for helping with asthma and helping to breathe, get deeper breaths and dilate the
bronchioles. Yeah.
And it started getting on higher doses, it could help give you more energy and help suppress your appetite, and so people were using it as weight loss and athletic performance, and with the doses that were on the label for these supplements, that was fine, but our society is sort of a more is better society. Yeah. So there's people taking, 4, 5, 10 times the recommended dose and then having heart attacks and dying.
Yeah, I was going to say that cannot be good for your heart.
Right. And so it was pulled off the market late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere in there, probably late 90s. I actually used that when I was in high school playing football, and it was a really good herb to help with my athletic performance and my endurance, but I didn't abuse it. And, but yeah, the people that were having the side effects and, in possibly dying or having heart attacks were people that were just taking ungodly amounts of it. So now it's not allowed, it's ever since then, it's not been released back on the market, and it probably won't be.
And I think there's a chemical like that was in the diet pills that we all took in the 80s in high school that was very similar to that. Was it dexedrine or just something that they also, for the same reason?
Right.
It was suppressive, but yeah, too much of it could give you cardiac problems. So it happens in the OTC aisle too.
Right.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about, how do you pronounce kratom?
Kratom, yeah.
Yeah, you know about this. The kids know about this. I don't know anything about this.
So I don't know a ton about it either, but, kratom is actually, it's an herb that's already been banned by the FDA. So
where does it grow? Like, what is it native to? Okay, I don't even know.
I don't know. It's not important.
Okay,
it's one of these herbs that has,
but it gets a lot of that's what we prop this up to say the supplement industry is a disaster. Right. That's when I hear that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's but the FDA has already banned it.
Okay.
But just like marijuana in states where marijuana isn't legal, it's never stopped people from getting marijuana.
That's true.
It's another herb. So it's different with herbs.
That's true. Yeah.
As far as FDA control, when you can grow something in your home and sell it or create a little Etsy account or whatever to sell these things, as opposed to a drug, where it takes an awful lot more sophistication to chemically create a drug and then sell it on the open market.
Very true.
So you'll get things like kratom that you can find, although I did
What's it supposed to do?
So
I don't even know that.
So it's an herb. It has properties where it binds to opiate receptors in the brain, which, that's a clear area where, it's not going to be legal.
Right. We schedule those. They have addictive properties.
Right.
We get very concerned, and we should.
Yeah. But then it also seems to stimulate serotonin and dopamine receptors.
Oh, wow.
So you get some stimulant effects, but also pain relieving effects or different things. And so people can feel good.
Sounds like a win-win, Ted. I don't know.
Right.
The problem is.
But with as far as fatalities with this herb, everything I could find is most of the fatalities, people were taking other cough syrups or other opiates or things along with it. So who knows how much is safe to take or whatnot. It's never been studied well enough because it really shouldn't be legal.
Oh, got it.
But also, you're not going to find this on Amazon or...
Are you sure? I'm going to do a search right now.
I did a couple of weeks ago when I was looking up kratom to prepare for this episode, and I couldn't find it.
That's good. That's good news. All right. Well, what about And was this in the video too? Personal stories.
Yeah.
I have such a problem with that.
Yeah, personal stories, they sound good.
They sell things.
Right. They
things
sell
that
a
are
lot of
good things and bad things they sell,
Right.
because we are naturally people that want to help other people. We share.
Right.
Right? Like, oh, well, this helped me, then you should try it.
Yeah.
And nobody says, well, here are the 15 steps that got me to make this decision. And maybe they'd even hired a naturopathic doctor and they had done this and that, but you should take it. You can circumvent all of that. Just take it. You'll be just like me.
Right.
And no two people are the same.
No.
And I just don't like it as a marketing ploy.
Well, because it's not a good marketing ploy. It is a good marketing ploy. That's the point.
Yeah.
But it's not accurate. You can't substitute people's testimonials for good science and research.
That is a sentence right there. Wait a minute. Let's say that again. You can't substitute people's testimonials for good science and research. That's
Right.
it. End of podcast. That's great. That is the sentence to take. But
Right.
people, you think you can.
Right.
Because the story is so much more engaging.
Right.
Because what would I rather do? Hear a success story about how you turned your life around with this stuff in a bottle, or wade through this data and research.
Right.
And I say, I don't think it's a choice between these two. I
No.
think you hire a naturopathic doctor
Right.
that knows about it. That's how you get the information, first of all, by
Right.
an expert, and then also what's going to benefit you.
Right. And also make sure to watch our first episode that we released of this podcast, Ditch Your Doctor.
Yes.
How social media has become the new medical expert, because we talk about this in great
Yes,
detail
we do.
about wading through all of that.
Yes. Okay. Where are we going with this? Oh, personal stories.
Right.
Yes. Well, that's where we started. Where are we going? Okay.
Yeah, so in the video they talked about lion's mane. And that lion's mane is a mushroom, and it has some good cognitive benefits. And there are definitely some good professional companies that have lion's mane in supplements, and it has a good safety profile overall. But they were highlighting, people that had bad experiences, or there was some kind of website devoted to people that had bad experiences with this herb or this mushroom. And so it's one of those things that, people can have bad reactions to anything, whether it's, for me, what I look at in the most likely scenarios are going to be either, it's a plant that you can have an allergic reaction to pretty much anything.
True.
But the other piece is, what was the quality of this product? Was it contaminated? And that was what was causing the side effects for all these people, not that it was the actual herb causing the problem.
Right. And that's just unknown.
No, exactly.
Okay.
But that's where taking testimonials and personal experiences and saying, look how dangerous the supplement industry is.
Someone I know took this and they, God forbid, died.
Right.
Well, I'm definitely going to avoid that because I don't want to die.
Right.
Instead of seeing or going into it a little bit more. It's the same thing.
And of course, it's one of those things that really made me frustrated about that johnnyharris video, because he's trying to push a more scientific view of doing everything, yet on the other hand, going the total opposite direction and trying to smear the supplement industry by giving some testimonials.
Yes, I had a problem with that too. Yeah, you can't have it both ways. Yes. Okay, what else did he talk about? Or we were going to talk about melatonin, such a hot topic.
It is. It's, over the last couple of years.
Even they put it for kids.
Right.
Like they make the little things for the kids with the melatonin. I'm like, oh my goodness, people are just out there buying it. I did have a few years ago, many patients whose children were prescribed it. I felt so much better about that because I could check the dose, but then people could just buy it and give it to their kids.
Right. So, melatonin in general is, first, it's a hormone that's produced from the pineal gland at the base of the brain, and it tells, it's the main thing is that it works on your circadian rhythm, your day-night cycle. So it's a hormone that's produced around bedtime. It increases near bedtime and throughout the night in healthy people, and it decreases as you get towards morning, for when you want to wake up. And
Right.
it's opposite of the stress hormone cortisol, which spikes right around the time you wake up, and it goes to its lowest level right before bed. So the two of those work on your circadian rhythm together, those two
Interesting.
hormones.
I don't know that people know that.
Right. But anyhow, so melatonin is very helpful for that.
If you're not producing enough.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and it can be used for different things.
Or it can be used like a medication.
Yeah.
Like to help you sleep.
Right.
Even if you are, quote unquote, producing enough.
Right. But also, it can be used for change of season or jet lag or things, because by when you use, say, I'll often do for somebody a week's worth every night taking before bed, and it can reset that internal clock.
It can?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be every night?
No, it can be just to reset that internal clock.
That's quite amazing.
Yeah, it is. It can be great that way. And for some people, it can just be part of what they need to help them to fall asleep on a nightly basis and get a more restful sleep.
Yeah, sleep's incredibly important.
It's also, I've used it with, there's a lot of research in the past for cancer patients that high doses of it, usually 20 milligrams is the dose that's recommended, that actually has antioxidant effects to actually slow and reverse tumor growth in some people.
Or those are in vivo studies, with people?
I don't remember. It's been a while since I've looked at it.
I just was wondering, are those people super, super tired? Although I had patients that were prescribed up to that many milligrams by a doctor, and that was just enough to help them fall asleep.
Yeah. Well, I've had several patients many patients over the years that I've used high doses of melatonin for that in cancer patients. Oh. And, has benefits, haven't really had the daytime sleepiness. And, one of the big things that everybody worries about with melatonin is that it's going to stop you from producing your own internal melatonin. But I found that I can have patients taking high doses for 5 or 6 years or more and go off of it, and their bodies pick up right where it left off, and they never have trouble sleeping.
That's so interesting. That's so different than like vitamin D. You'd have to kind of keep taking it to keep your levels up. But it's interesting.
Well, but vitamin D is something that our bodies don't produce.
Ah, that's true.
Yeah, so even though it can be a hormone, we don't produce it.
But we do produce melatonin.
Correct.
And the thinking was, and that I could see some logic there, that if you gave it to the body would be like, well, you don't need me to make this anymore.
Right. It's like thyroid hormone. When you supplement a full dose of Synthroid or thyroid medications, over time, the thyroid will stop working because it doesn't need to produce thyroid hormone. So you will see people that
makes sense.
Are getting high doses.
Because there's that feedback mechanism with the thyroid that maybe we need more research on that melatonin. That's fascinating.
But anyhow, so with this whole issue with the risks over the last couple of years has been in children for melatonin.
Okay.
And so we have a couple of different pieces of that. For one, is there are a lot of melatonin gummies or different things that are tasty. So kids could, if they're left out, kids could overdose because they eat a bunch of these gummies on their own.
Yeah.
There's also parents that are giving these by themselves and don't know proper dosing.
Because they didn't tell their pediatrician.
Right.
Or they just.
Right.
Yeah.
And, but so there's been a couple of studies looking at this. The first one that I could find was in June of 2022, a report released by the CDC looking at 10 years, the previous 10 years of time where there were 287 admissions to the ICU, 5 requiring ventilators, and 2 deaths from melatonin.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Over a 10-year period. And I couldn't find really any specific information in, those kind of CDC reports just give you the overall numbers. It doesn't delve into specific cases. So you can look at, those 2 deaths and the 5.
Tell me more about them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I did find another study that was published just a few months later in the Journal of Analytical Toxicology in October of 22, where I think it was North Carolina, and they were looking at 7 suspected cases of melatonin causing deaths. And 5 of the 7 were children 5 months or less. Most of them were 2 or 3 months old. And our bodies really don't even produce melatonin until after 3 months to develop our circadian rhythm. And that's where, infants, you think about, they sleep off and on all day and night when they're really young. And it's not until a certain time where
it's not like the sun and the triggering the melatonin. Right. They don't have that.
They don't have that. And so looking at this study, there were, like I said, 5 of the 7 were under 5 months, most of them 2 or 3 months old. And the other 2 were, I think, 2 and 3 years old. But out of these cases, there was only one that looked like pretty much that it was
very clearly
straight
line. Yes. Melatonin caused the death.
Because this case, still only somewhat, because this case was a 3-month-old infant who had a twin, and the mother had been dosing them both 8 to 10 times a day with 5 milligrams of melatonin, which is crazy. You wouldn't even,
that's a crazy high
you would
number.
Never give adults that much melatonin in a day.
Right.
But these poor little kids were getting that, and one of them happened to die. And their blood level of melatonin was 1,400 nanograms per milliliter. Now, the other cases that we looked at that were highlighted in that study out of those 7, that one was 1,400 nanograms per milliliter. The next highest was 460.
Quite a leap down.
And then 170, 82, 73, 10, and 3 nanograms per milliliter. So you see, that one was the one that was most evident that, okay, they were really overdosing. Yeah. Luckily, the other twin didn't die. But the other cases, looking at them, most of them had some kind of viral infection or COVID then or just before. A couple, at least 1, maybe 2 of them, the cases, there were unsafe sleeping arrangements where a parent was sleeping with the 2 or 3 month old child on a couch. And one of the possible links there was listed as asphyxiation, which would make sense that the parent could accidentally smother the child. And then a lot of them had some kind of genetic or other physical anomalies too. So
your point is that oftentimes the headline is all that we are allowing to our brain.
Right.
And we don't realize that there are confounding factors. There are other things. And it's not that we're making light of any of that.
No.
It's just to simply say that in the world we live in and the way we've been kind of like conditioned to think, we tend to just take something, be it a story of something that worked great or a story where something tragic happened.
Right.
And that's it for our information.
Right. So there are a lot of different pieces to what makes a good quality nutrition vitamin supplement. Yes. So first, you want to make sure that it actually contains the actual active ingredient. So,
right. But how would I know that?
Well, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But I want to cover
just the basics. Okay, so what you want to do now is just define what quality
control
means. Okay.
What quality control yes.
It has what it says it has.
Right.
Probably it doesn't have contaminants.
Correct.
And
yes, so it has the active ingredients that are claimed on the label in the proper dosing.
Oh yes.
And it has it's free from contaminants. And it's the same from batch to batch.
Those are great things. Consistency.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to worry that, okay, this is and that isn't because they've not done the proper stuff.
So when you look at
steps,
the industry and and the differing quality control processes, a lot of companies will say, for instance, that it has the actual active ingredient. So a company orders ashwagandha from their supplier, and they get a brown powder that labeled ashwagandha at a certain dosage, and they just assume that that's what they got. they don't actually test it to see themselves to verify. And that's how some of these companies save a lot of money and can offer a cheaper product because
they didn't
do any testing.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So yeah, in order to really know, you want to test the product and make sure that it has the proper dosage of the active ingredient, and test it to make sure that there are, for a battery of contaminants that are known to be in that supplement,
that they're not in it.
Right. And so with that, like one of my gold standard for a company is a company called Vital Nutrients. And they've been around since around the early 2000s, 2001, somewhere in there. And they were the first company that really started testing every single batch. So they would test the raw ingredients when they came in to verify that it was the right ingredient and what potency it had, so that they could adjust the amount of powder that they put in the capsule so that it had what was on the label. They also were the first that were really concerned about contaminants and testing for a broad battery of contaminants to make sure that they're getting a pure product. And so they would test the raw ingredients, and if it wasn't up to the standard, they're going to kick that out and try to find another supplier that did have the proper quality control, so that they could give a good quality product. They also go above and beyond most everybody else, and for extracting a lot of the active constituents in different vitamins and other supplements, you need certain solvents, chemical solvents, and they are one of the few that actually test to make sure that those solvents aren't still in the end product. Because
they could be.
Yeah.
Which would be a contaminant. So they test for that too.
Right. So I was, when they first came about, I remember being at a conference, it was probably about 2003, and they were making a big stink of this, conference, because all of the other companies are saying, oh, there's no way they're doing all of that testing. Well, because they not only were they doing internal, they were actually using an outside lab to do all of the testing to make sure that they're not fudging the numbers.
Wow, that was.
And at the time, all the other supplement companies said, this can't be done. They wouldn't be able to afford to do that.
It's cost prohibitive.
Right.
So they just didn't believe it was being done.
Correct.
So then why should they have to do it? It just can't be done.
Right. And it's funny because I was at their booth at this conference when somebody else came back to the owner, and actually Rick Leva, and asked him about it. And Rick is a pretty neat guy. And he's very calm, real chill. He's, at all these conferences, he's usually wearing a Hawaiian shirt. And so he looked at this guy. He said, yeah, it is really cost prohibitive. Last year we did about $4 million in sales, and we spent $800,000 on testing.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was as a new company getting started.
Yeah.
Now, several years back, he sold the company to a bigger company, but yeah, he was really the pioneer in quality control. He was a ND and a pharmacist.
Oh wow! I remember you talking about him. Yeah, good combo.
So his whole thing was that the supplement industry wasn't doing good quality control. That he couldn't count on the results with his product for patient to patient.
Right, and that's what pharmacists are always saying. Well, I don't want to know anything about that part of the pharmacy, the over-the-counter supplement aisle, because they're not regulated, so I don't want to know anything about it. Right.
And so looking at the industry to try to figure out how we can know, the end consumer can know good products, it's a lot harder. I would say the number one thing is get your supplements recommended by a naturopathic doctor who has done that research and understands the companies and knows the quality control and knows that the product isn't overpriced either. Because I balance that out for my products with patients. I want to make sure that it's of the highest quality. But if I have a couple of companies that have very similar quality control, but one's significantly cheaper, I'm going to do that for my patient to get them,
Yes.
do better.
Very nice of you.
But
Yeah.
like the Vital Nutrients, most of their products the product price is still in line with all of the other companies.
So
and sometimes even cheaper.
It's not that they're passing on the cost of all this extra quality control
right
to the patient.
Yeah, and there are a couple of different organizations that you can look at to for understanding quality control. It's Nature Made. You see their commercials, and they talk about. I
was just going to talk about the Nature Made commercials recommended by pharmacists.
Yeah,
apparently
because they're USP certified.
Okay, so that's a good thing.
Yeah,
that means a third party.
They're being certified that a lot of the basics
there. The quality that you mentioned is there.
Exactly, but the way theirs is done is like a lot of supplement companies can claim good quality control, but they do what's called skip lot testing, where they're not testing every single batch. And so, the thought is that, we're getting from the same supplier. It should be the same from batch to batch and lot to lot. But if you're not testing every batch, you can always get an outlier that does have contaminants or isn't the right ingredient, and it gets missed.
True.
So, and I would say that pretty much every company that I've looked at when they're USP certified, they're like the Nature Made and stuff, where they might have what's claimed on the label, but it might be a cheap, not really good quality product to begin with. So you get a multivitamin from Nature Made.
Yes.
And it's going to have forms of the vitamins that are the cheapest and least active too.
Oh, so, that's a whole other thing.
So there's the formulas matter too.
Yeah.
So you do want quality control and make sure that it has what it says on the label. It doesn't have contaminants and consistent from dose to dose, but then you also have this whole other piece of there's different forms of these supplements. Some might be a lot better for a person than another. It might be much better utilized in the body.
Wow. That's a whole other level.
It is. And that's why
I think it's too much for people to try to understand.
Right. And there are a couple of other organizations. NSF is another one.
I've seen that on some labels.
Yeah.
Even over the counter in the grocery store.
Yeah, and they have a specific sports certification too, where people in professional or maybe even college sports, if they're going to take supplements, they can only take supplements that are NSF certified.
That's where I've seen that.
So that they know that it doesn't contain the contaminants or any performance-enhancing drugs.
Yeah.
Another source for the end consumer that they can have a better idea is a website called consumerlabs.org.
Yes, we're familiar with that, actually, as pharmacists.
Yeah. So Consumer Labs is a company, consumerlabs.org is a company that does a lot of quality control testing to help the end consumer know if the product is better quality or not. You do have to pay for a subscription to it. I think it's $50 or $60 a year.
And then you get access to all their data.
Right. So that's something that people can look at and use to get a better idea of whether this product is, good and safe.
Right. Makes sense. All right. Our next topic is regulations. I guess we're talking about regulations. All right. So we wanted to cover current regulations because I think there's sometimes becomes an idea that it is a totally unregulated industry.
Right.
It is regulated. It is regulated differently than drugs. Obviously, a drug has to go through something different. And that's why they have to put on the label too, not regulated by the FDA. What's the phrase supplements have on it? Not evaluated. These claims have not been evaluated by the FDA.
Correct.
Okay, so I think that's very confusing for people. What does that mean?
So you can have, there are claims on a product to give the end consumer a basic idea of what it's for. So for melatonin, it's going to say it's for sleep.
Right. That's true. You don't want just a label that says melatonin.
Right.
It could be for anything.
Right.
But you can't say it cures insomnia.
Exactly. And that's the big difference is that you can't.
For sleep, just so you have a basic idea.
Right.
Because bad things can happen if you don't have a basic idea.
Right.
So that's a good thing. But these supplement companies can't be making claims.
Right. Right.
All right.
So they can give a basic idea of what it's for,
Okay.
but yeah, they can't say it is to cure of disease.
Right. Because only drugs cure diseases.
Correct.
Right. Or that's the law. I don't necessarily believe that, but
Yes.
that is what the law says.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what else do we want to talk about? More about the regulations.
Yeah. So.
Oh, yes, the 1994 Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. I was just trying to think where I was in pharmacy school when that came out. I was just like a little baby pharmacist, I guess,
Yeah.
because I graduated pharmacy school in 1990.
Okay.
And so I didn't learn about it in school, but I do think I remember the state board telling us about things that they were confiscating, and there was
Right.
some things with that, yeah.
Right. And so when we talked about the L-tryptophan thing, that's
Yes.
what spawned on that regulation.
I see.
So-
That brought us the 1994 Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act.
Correct.
Wow.
Because of the tryptophan deaths
Mm-hmm.
from the contamination, the FDA was looking at really greatly regulating the industry.
The entire supplement industry.
Yes.
Yes.
And so
okay.
then the supplement industry came together to lobby for better.
And the people.
regulations. Yes, people too.
The people too.
Yeah.
Right.
So it created a way for supplements to be able to be on the market and have not the same regulations
But
as the
some
FDA.
regulations.
Yes. And so a lot of, if you like in that video, there was a representative from the FDA talking
Yes.
about how supplements, can be, put on the market without any FDA oversight.
Right.
And that's they're sort of, that's a gray area because anything so if you have a new ingredient, so a special
in a supplement.
so
Okay.
a new herb or some other ingredient,
Meaning something that
hasn't been released before.
like say you discover an herb. That's,
Exactly.
Okay. So
Then you have to send a petition to fill out an application to the FDA, letting them know that you're going to be releasing this.
I'm going to be making a product out of it.
Yeah, give
Okay.
any research
Selling it.
to show its efficacy and safety and everything.
So you do have to show some research.
Yes.
It's not like I found this growing under this tree.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so that gives the FDA the ability to then do more research too, to decide whether this is truly a dietary supplement that should be allowed on the market.
Okay. Yeah.
Where most dietary supplements are in a list of ingredients that have already been okayed.
Right.
And
Is that like the generally recognized as safe, or is that a different kind of classification?
No, I don't remember the name of the
there's-
list, but
okay.
but so that's where.
But we've seen them before. They're already on the market. They're in supplements.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you can create a new formula with several different ingredients.
So you don't have to start from scratch.
Right.
Okay.
But you can release that without any FDA oversight.
Okay.
So you can create a whole new formula with different supplements that have already been approved
Okay.
without having to go to the FDA and file for that.
Start from scratch because
Start
we
from scratch.
know these ingredients have already been on the market.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So unlike a prescription drug where
They're all new. They're all new
brand
chemistry.
new.
They're all brand new. That's how
Exactly.
you get the patent. That's how you get the money. That's how, right? They're all
Right.
brand new.
Right.
Yes.
And there's also, when you talk about, there's a big difference in what you can do for research too. Because with a drug, it's patented, nobody else can sell it.
Yeah, so you have some time.
So you have some time to make up your money for that multi-billion dollars worth of research.
Right.
Where if you have a supplement, say an herb or something that other people can grow,
Yeah.
then you don't have the whole market cornered. You can spend tons of money on research and lose your shirt. So nobody's going to put that same level, but there's also not the same risks. Because
Right.
like we said earlier, most of these herbs that we've been looking at have been out for hundreds of years being used and scrutinized and looked at. And the other segment of the dietary supplement industry are nutrients that are already in the body.
True. Yeah.
So you can look at dosing and
Right.
yeah,
Whereas the
different
drug
side
has
effects
never
or
been in
different
the
things.
body. Yeah.
Correct.
Right. It's
Right.
it's a novel
Right.
chemical that we're going to test to do something good for the body. And we're going to go through the different kind of channels.
Correct.
Right. That makes sense, actually. That's probably the most sense that whole thing is made. And I get very confused by it when I'm trying to explain things to people to be just really neutral and honest about safety profiles of drugs versus supplements.
Right.
And they are different and how they're different and how they come to market and how they're evaluated and the steps that they have to go through to get to your shelf, this shelf back here behind me or the shelf out there.
Right.
Right. And I think for the over-the-counter medication, if you have a new medication, which really if you look, all the over-the-counter medications are similar in that they all have the same chemistry. It's just different formulations of there's no
Right.
new chemistry that's coming over the counter.
Well, and they're drugs that were probably most of them are all previously prescribed
first. And then over years, we decided the safety profile was enough that we could just go ahead and move it.
Right.
And we could argue that too. That's a whole different argument on whether or not people should be allowed to, in a way it's similar. Should people be able to freely shop in the supplement aisle? On one hand, should people be able to freely shop open market, can purchase in the OTC aisle with over-the-counter drugs? I mean, you can't say one is safe and one's not and back that up with enough data, really, to make it. So if you're going to say we've got to pull these, then you really do have to pull the over-the-counter drugs.
Right.
I mean, if your argument truly is about safety.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure it is. I think it might be about money.
Everything's about money.
Yes, it's all about that. Okay, so anything else we wanted to say about quality regulations?
I think we covered all of that.
Yeah, I think we did too. A supplement has to file with the FDA, the ingredients. You did a really good job, I think, going over all of that. Was there something about self-regulation that he said that had to be addressed? Was he implying that there is no self-regulation of the supplement industry? But you made that point. There are supplement companies like the one you mentioned that not only do they regulate themselves, but they hire third parties to do the regulation to take themselves out of it.
Right. And so, but that comes down to understanding the different companies and understanding quality control so that you can make an educated purchase.
Right.
That of course, everybody does have to somewhat self-regulate, but the companies that are going to have the best products and make the most money are the ones that do much better quality control and have much better products that are going to be consistent and without contaminants.
Which is great for people to know.
Right. That you're taking a supplement that doesn't have wildly different levels of the different nutrients that it claims.
And I think what people don't know also is the FDA allows for some generic manufacturers to veer from the milligrams.
Right.
People
about 7%.
7 or 9.
Okay.
So when it comes to medications like your thyroid medication, levothyroxine, if the batch from this generic manufacturer is 7% over the allowable allowance from the FDA, but then you switch generics, and this generic company just happens to be 7% under the allowable amount from the FDA, you have a 14% variation in your body when it comes to something like a thyroid can make a huge difference for you. It's kind of like when some women would say, I don't like this generic brand of oral contraceptives. And we say, there's no difference. There is.
Right.
They're allowed some difference, and people can be sensitive to small changes.
Right.
And I think people just don't realize that the FDA does allow that too for generic drugs. And if they didn't, drugs would be cost prohibitive. There could be no generics. So there is going to be a little bit of variation that is allowed in that industry as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think one more thing that I just thought of that I wanted to cover
please.
is when we talk about regulation of different supplements and the FDA's role.
Yep.
They do pull different, over the years, they have pulled different supplements off the market.
The FDA has. Yeah, that's true.
And not necessarily for cause of, for the public health. Like, for instance, there's a supplement called phenibut that is a form of the brain chemical GABA that has been in a supplement form. I used it a lot with patients because it worked great for anxiety and sleep. And
I didn't know about this one.
Yeah, and so it worked really well. But about, 4 or 5 years ago, the FDA decided that it really shouldn't be a dietary supplement.
Why?
And because the way it was originally created was originally created as a Russian anxiety medication. So it was created as a drug originally. And so now when you look at phenibut and how it was typically being used, it was much closer to a true physiological supplement than, say, a benzodiazepine.
Which is used for sleep and anxiety.
Right. So, they both worked on GABA receptors.
Right.
But for the phenibut, you had to use hundreds of milligrams where, for, say, Xanax, you can use a half a milligram or something. It was a very low dosage. And it didn't, I didn't really see patients have trouble with addiction. That people, most of the time, people could get off of it fairly easy after they didn't need it, and without that same addictive properties as the benzodiazepines. And so, in way I was using it in my practice and using it with patients is it was similar to other forms of GABA supplements that were on the market, which were still chemically created also, only it worked a lot better. But because phenibut was created as
in another country as
a drug in another country, they decided that it couldn't be sold as a supplement here.
What a very unique reason.
Yeah. And but there was some abuse of it too. There was because where I would, the supplement companies that produce good quality supplements for it, there was usually most of the companies would say about 900 milligrams was the max dose.
Okay.
Per day. But there were people that were taking thousands of milligrams every 4 hours.
Oh my goodness.
And, they were experiencing like limitless drug type effects where they, just felt amazing and could think clearly and all this stuff.
And they're buying it over the counter? Like it is?
Yeah, well, online.
They're buying it online. Oh,
yes.
That's why I've never seen it.
But then after a certain period of time, these people, because they were taking so much, they crashed, and they crashed hard.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So, again, it comes down to making sure that things are being taken in the proper dosage.
Yes, back to that.
That's safe, that's safe to take.
Right. Yeah, I did not know about that. That's kind of too bad that somebody can't do something with that.
Right.
To allow it to be available. What else about quality control did we want to say?
I think that covers it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you already talked about the resources for checking supplements.
Yes.
Oh, what about how do I know I need a supplement? I thought that was such an interesting point that he said, like, people are buying things they don't need. People are wasting their money. Wow, we can't.
And there's just a simple blood test that can let you know if you're deficient or not.
Exactly, but there's not.
Well,
there's not a simple, inexpensive, readily accessible
for all of it.
Right. And he did imply that there is.
Yes, he did. Where, say, something like vitamin D. Yeah, vitamin D
easy.
Blood test is pretty easy, pretty accurate.
And now your insurance will cover it.
Right.
It wasn't that long ago that you had to pay out of pocket for a simple vitamin D level test.
Right.
Maybe it was expensive to do. I don't know.
Now, when you look at other readily available tests, I find that they're not so useful. Like, for
Why?
Say like B12 test is done frequently. B12 and
Yeah,
folate,
that
both,
is.
both of those are done very frequently.
Yeah, so you know if you need D, you know if you need B12.
Right.
Right. Very simple. It's going to show low. You go for like any other thing you're getting tested in your blood, it's going to show low. So easy. But in general, when you get blood work done at a doctor, you're not getting B and C and micronutrients unless you're on TPN, total parenteral nutrition. You have no idea what your levels of these other things are. But even if you did...
Yeah. So that B12 test,
yeah,
there are 4 different forms of B12 in our
for
body.
goodness sake.
So there's 2 active forms, methylcobalamin, which is the most commonly known.
That one I know.
There's also another active form called adenosylcobalamin, which is a lot more used in the mitochondria to help make energy.
That seems like an important one.
It is.
Okay.
And then we have the cyanocobalamin, which is the cheap form that's in a lot of supplements.
Yep, seen that on the labels.
And hydroxycobalamin, which is another one that's a little more expensive form, but the cyanocobalamin and the hydroxycobalamin aren't active.
So what is the blood test you get at your doctor measuring?
All 4 together. So
all 4 together.
Yes.
So this number you're seeing is actually representative of 4 little guys.
Right.
Some of which are very helpful and some of which are less helpful.
Right. So
oh my goodness.
And I think that's why in conventional medicine, and it's become standard to use the cyanocobalamin for a supplement because it's the one that helps to boost the B12 level the most blood test.
But it's not the most active.
Right. And so a lot of people can have trouble converting it into the active forms, which is why it can build up. Because
that's not
you're
good.
giving it, and if you're not using it to make the active forms, it just builds up.
And this goes back to my thing. We don't treat a piece of paper; we treat a patient.
Right.
So look at your levels. Look at your levels. Look at your levels of whatever we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the only thing that's indicative of what's happening in your body.
Right. You could have a high level of B12 in your blood, yet still be deficient in the active forms.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
So simple. Get a blood test. That's a great example.
So for the methylcobalamin, which is the most widely looked at active form.
Okay.
So there is another specialty test called methylmalonic acid.
That you can get it from a doctor?
Yes.
Will they know that? Okay.
Well, most doctors aren't going to know that.
Okay. I was going to say.
It's available from Quest Diagnostics and LabCorp and those kind of labs.
In your blood?
In your blood,
okay.
Yes. And it's a test so methylmalonic acid is a compound that is highly dependent on methylcobalamin to get broken down in the body. So a high level of methylmalonic acid would suggest that you're deficient in the methylcobalamin vitamin.
It's very complicated.
I know it is.
No, but that's so good to know.
Yeah. And so, so there are more and more of some of these specialty tests.
But you got to know to ask for it.
Yeah.
And then what to do with okay, so then maybe you do ask for it, then does the doctor know what to do with that
Or it's probably not going to get covered under your insurance, so you're going to spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on these tests that you don't know for sure how to look at it. The doctor doesn't know how to interpret it.
So then you've spent money on something that's not going to be very useful.
Right.
Unless they took it to you.
Right. But even with that, there are companies, one of the best known is called SpectraCell, and they do a wide variety of vitamin and mineral assays in a single blood test.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, now as a naturopathic doctor in Ohio, can you order that?
No.
Okay,
not really.
so,
but it's it's a $500 test.
That's a lot.
It is, but
you get what do you get from that? What information about your body would you get from that?
It'll let you know if you're severely deficient in any of those different nutrients.
Which may be worth it to know.
It may be worth it, but it's not. I haven't seen a lot of benefits because it still doesn't give us an idea if you have optimal amounts for your body.
There's a whole other thing.
Yes.
So there's a difference between being deficient and being optimal.
Right.
Right.
So when we look at the RDA for vitamins and vitamins and minerals,
Yes.
So you're looking at
the bare minimum
bare
to keep you
minimum.
alive and not give you like scurvy.
Exactly.
With
So
vitamin C.
yes, so 60 milligrams of vitamin C per day is needed so you don't get scurvy.
It's very different than an optimal level.
Right. It doesn't tell you how much vitamin C you need to be fully healthy. It just tells you in order to not get scurvy, you need 60 milligrams a day.
Right. Wow. Yes. So then, to me, it seems like there's no simple test that can tell me if I am at optimal levels.
Right.
Of anything.
No,
right? I mean, those tests could help.
Yes.
But they're not the answer.
Right.
And I don't like when something is presented to be so simple.
Right. And
it's not.
No. And it brings me more, like when you talk about over the last 10 years, we're talking a lot more about genetics.
Oh, that's all
and
the
like
right.
the MTHFR gene. So
which is what again?
I can't remember the actual.
Okay, but what? No. What's it for? Why would I get that? Why would I test myself for that?
So conventionally, it's looked at by obstetricians because people that have genetic variants are more likely to have miscarriages or birth defects.
Oh, okay, that's a good reason. Okay.
Yeah, but it's because this enzyme that MTHFR gene makes, it helps to convert folate into the methylated active folate. Mm-hmm. So, we talk about folic acid, although folic acid isn't, folic acid is a chemical form of folate that's created to put in supplements and everything.
Yes.
But it's not, we want to talk about folate as the actual vitamin, the actual B vitamin. And depending on the research you look at, somewhere between 20 and 40% of the population have some kind of variation in this MTHFR gene.
So that would be very important to know.
Right. And it would,
if you were of childbearing age and you wanted to have kids, you'd want to know.
But also, it's important for a lot of other things.
Like
the methylfolate is important for our brain chemistry to make and break down different brain chemicals. It's important for inflammation in the body, for liver detoxification, for hormone production. So there's and energy production is a big thing. So there's been a lot of studies with chronic fatigue syndrome that these people that are really debilitated with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia both, that there's studies looking at they tend to much more likely to have this MTHFR gene where they're not getting the active form of folate.
No matter how much they take the folate, but the body can't convert it.
Enough, yes.
So then if you say you have chronic fatigue syndrome and you had that test and you did realize that was true, then you would give what supplement then?
Well, there's methylated folate supplements. So it all gets very confusing for the public.
It's not a simple blood test. Yes, very confusing, but also hopeful to know that these things exist,
right? And
that you could go down that path,
right? And there's also the more we know, the more we realize we don't know with all of these things.
Yes, always.
Yeah,
always with that.
And another important thing to look at when we're talking about vitamins and minerals and all of the the supplements that are things that are in the body is we're not always using them to supplement a deficiency. Sometimes because of our genetics or
to compensate
different things, we're using it more in super physiologic doses to help the body to heal. So it can be given at a lot higher dose than what you need to just supplement a deficiency to actually help the body to heal.
Wow, which is in a totally different area and something you wouldn't be attempting on your own.
Right. So a good conventional example is you have a lot more neurologists now prescribing 400 milligrams of riboflavin for migraine patients.
Yeah.
The riboflavin along with magnesium.
Yep.
And the thought is that it helps with the mitochondria to make energy in the brain to help circumvent the migraines, to help reduce migraines.
It's amazing.
And so people aren't, this isn't to supplement
they're not deficient.
Yes.
We're just using it as opposed to the drugs, which would have side effects.
Right.
and expenses associated.
Right. And often to circumvent different genetic variances or
that maybe we don't even know about.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So I like to, when I think about this, obviously there's a lot of things that we don't know, and but I would say that when we look at supplements, a lot of conventional doctors will poo-poo vitamins and supplements, for one, because maybe they've never taken something that's good quality and it actually in the actual dosage. But
very true.
They probably, most people, if you can get through medical school and put yourself through the rigors of residency and 100-hour shifts or different things, you have to have a certain constitution to get through that.
That's such
and
a
so
good
those
point.
People probably would.
So nature v. nurture. So naturally, they're wired for it.
Right. And they're much less likely to need that extra intervention.
Yes.
So I like to look at it as there's about a third of the population that probably really can benefit a lot from different supplements and get their, to be given them and to really help their body to heal. And a lot of people that are having a lot more chronic illnesses. You have another third that it can help some, but just you're not going to see as quite as much benefits. And then you have a third of people that they have really great genetics, and I'd like to liken it to the Today Show when I can't remember what his name was.
Not Al Roker. That's the only one I know.
The one before that, Willard Scott.
Oh,
yeah. And he'd have the people that turn 100.
Yes.
And
I missed that.
I know. And so he would, he'd go through this list of people that turn 100, and a lot of them would be talking about their reasons why they've lived this long, healthy life.
And it was always bacon and gin and cigarettes.
Well, it's half and half. Half of them would say
they smoked every day. They had some alcohol every day.
Or the other ones that said, I lived 100 because I never drank or smoked a day in my life.
Yes. And again, that's kind of like the testimonials that we were talking about before.
Right.
Like, oh, well, if that's what that person did, who I know nothing about.
Right.
Except I see their picture and this is what they're telling me. And that could be true or not true. We don't know.
Exactly.
But so much makes up a person.
And I look at that and I yes, that's just their testimonial, and is not, we talked about earlier.
It goes back to what we said about testimonials. You can't just say, well, this person did or didn't, so I, therefore.
Right.
Because there's so many things you don't know. What you're saying, you don't even know the genetics.
Right. But I look at that as sort of a broad view of some people have really good genetics, and they can get away with doing whatever to their body they need, and they're still going to live a long, fairly healthy, happy life.
Lucky.
And a lot of other people, we're not so lucky. We have genetics where we have to work an awful lot harder.
You need more nurture to make up for the nature.
Right. So we have to work a lot harder to feel good and stay healthy.
I think that's where I am, yeah. And then the ones in the middle, it's kind of like in the middle ground.
Right.
There's some variation. I love that, the thirds rule. And you kind of... maybe you need to know where you are. And I think there's clues to that.
Right.
But if you really want to know, like your genetics, there are certain things that you can test, certain things you cannot.
Right.
When it comes to anything that you want to know, even how to dose or what drug you should take or what kind of supplement that you may need.
Yeah.
Or not need or need to be optimal. And to go back to the beginning, we never intended for this podcast to be kind of like a blow-by-blow counter, whatever, agree, not disagree with that.
Johnny Harris video.
Johnny Harris, the supplement industry is full of BS.
Right.
It just sparked in us something that we're both passionate about.
Right.
Like for me, I want freedom to choose my supplements.
Yeah.
And you are very much in the supplement business in that you recommend a lot of them.
Right.
We're both very passionate about quality, purity, integrity of products, and we went over that. That's not so simple.
Right.
People don't understand the nuances and how it works. It's not just like the supplement industry is totally unregulated.
Right. It's the wild, wild west, like he said.
Yeah, it is not. And that drugs are so tightly regulated that there's never any problem with them.
Right.
It's much more complicated than that. As with your own body, there's not a simple blood test that's cheap and that is going to give you every answer that you ever wanted to know. What else did we cover? We covered so much. Definitely. This was our take on it.
Right.
Our take on the supplement
Right.
industry.
Yeah, and I think that we gave people a lot of good information, and I will include a link to this Johnny Harris video so you can watch on your own to see what he talked about. And if there are things that we didn't cover that you want more answers about, let us know. Write in the comments so that we can do another video of this and be able to answer some more of those things.
That's great. So we're going to provide links. And I think, Ted, we need a good sign off. And I would like our sign off to be what I used back in the day when I would give flu shots. And then my advice to people was always eat a vegetable, take a walk, think a happy thought. So that we can all agree. That's good advice for everybody.
Definitely.
And thanks for listening. Till next time.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Mary and Dr. Ted want to remind you to use the internet wisely and to always be sure to consult with your medical provider with any questions or concerns that you may have as you work towards your wellness goals. We look forward to sharing more content with you soon. Thanks for listening.